My linguistic and cultural background. Well, my early environment start with my birth in Boston, Massachusetts in January of 1980 to James and Monica Mehigan. After my release from the hospital, my parents took me to their newly purchased home in Maynard, Massachusetts. Maynard is a small middle-class community located 20 miles to the west of Boston. The town was founded as a mill town and used the water of the Assabet River to produce textiles. Mills were used to produce military uniforms up until they were closed in the 1950s. Um, After that, the mills, which are still the driving force in the community, were converted into office space where they originally housed Digital Computer Corporation. That was eventually purchased by Compaq. They've since moved on, and the mill now proudly serves as the home of Monster.com and Kurt Schilling's 38 Studios production company. As I mentioned before, the town's very small, only taking up 5.2 square miles, and inside of these 5 square miles live 10,400 people. And to give you an idea of the lack of diversity located there, 9,900 of those people are Caucasian, making up 94% of the town. And while we're on the subject, following high school I enrolled in a liberal arts university where culture of diversity and acceptance was very important, but the student body was in desperate need of a stronger minority influence. At the University of Vermont, where I went, 92% of the students are white, with Asian American, Hispanic, African American, and other ethnicities rounding out the other 8%. While minorities were not strongly represented there in number, I did always feel that acceptance of people of different cultures and lifestyles was preached and practiced at UVM. My path of a lack of diversity continues for me today, although it has veered slightly. I'm currently a special education instructional assistant at Westwood High School in Westwood, Massachusetts. I'm starting my 5th year in this role, and Westwood is actually less diverse than both Maynard and the University of Vermont, as the town is 95% white, 1% Chinese, and just under 1% Hispanic. There's 3 other races rounding out the other 3%. These numbers, however, do not represent the cultural dynamic of Westwood High School, as there are 30 students that are enrolled there through the METCO program in an effort to combat the racial isolation that they deal with in the town. Where I've experienced a good deal of diversity is in the town that I have lived in for the past 6 years, which is Randolph, Massachusetts. The town of Randolph is statistically one of the most diverse in the state. It's just over 60% white, 20% African American, and the remaining 20% filled out by a variety of races and ethnicities. For my social class growing up, we're going to talk briefly about my family's history. So on my social class and the social class of the people who raised me, my father was born in Cambridge in 1949. He's the son of an Irish immigrant who would succumb to complications from his addiction to alcohol when my father was just 13 years old. At that point in time, he was left with the responsibility of caring for his widowed Portuguese mother, who had a 3rd grade education, and his 10-year-old younger brother. So at that point, he did what he had to do, dropped out of high school, and became the man of the house. He took a job at a local bolt and screw company and began a blue-collar career that would last at the same company for 30 years and still continues today, which is 47 years later. I'm very proud to say that my father is one of the most intelligent people I know, and it's unfortunate that his educational opportunities were limited by his family situation. In 1988, with no motivation other than his young family and his own determination, he attended night school and received his high school diploma. There probably aren't that many people out there who can say they remember seeing their parent graduate from high school, and I'm fortunate to be one of them. He recently turned 60, and he distributes finished metal for production to various companies throughout the state. And he's probably the person in my life that I'm the most proud of. My mother was born in Boston in 1954 and raised in the town of Randolph. She was the daughter of an Italian stay-at-home mom who took odds and ends jobs and a Polish Army veteran who worked as a mechanic for American Airlines. She was the younger of 2 and at an early age had to deal with her older brother leaving to fight in Vietnam. She graduated from high school, but due to financial restraints, she was unable to attend college. She accepted a secretary position at Arthur D. Little and would climb the ladder all the way up to executive assistant. She served as an executive assistant at, among other places, the Environmental Careers Organization, the law offices of Harvey Silverglade and Andrew Good, Integrated Development Enterprises, and she's currently the executive assistant at Liaison International. Like my father, she also has received a degree later in life, completing an associate's degree she literally took one class at a time over the last 8 years. I'm proud to say that my parents' work ethic and determination gave them the ability to provide my family with tremendous opportunities despite their relatively limited education. I'm extremely grateful that I had a chance to become the first member of my family to graduate from college, and that certainly wouldn't have been possible without the efforts of my mother and father. As for the social class of my neighbors and the people around me growing up, it varied slightly from lower middle to upper middle class, but what I tend to find in Maine is everybody was just about the same. On to my social heritage. As I mentioned before, I'm of Irish, Italian, Polish, and Portuguese descent. It's interesting to note that I have no recollection of any Polish or Portuguese cultural activity growing up. And there always seemed to be Italian foods at holiday gatherings, and surprisingly enough, the culture I identified the most with was my Irish heritage. This is only surprising because the only grandparent I had that I never met was my father's Irish father. I identify strongly with my Irish heritage based primarily on my name. As soon as I introduce myself as Seamus Mehigan, I'm instantly associated with that part of my family's history. There's also an aspect of social acceptance in this area with being of Irish descent, and I feel as though that made me a part of who I was. There was definitely some selective memory when answering the questions of where my family came from. My religious background is fairly limited. Faith was never a big, strong part of my family's dynamic. I was baptized into the Roman Catholic Church and attended regularly as a child on Sundays and holidays. I also attended CCD to learn the basic teachings of the Catholic Church up until being confirmed at age 16. The interesting part of the story is that for as long as I can remember, my father has not attended services and did not see eye to eye with the church for one reason or another. At around the age of 13, my mother informed me that I would no longer be forced to go to church on Sundays. It just so happened that at that time, my best friend, then and still today, had a very religious family. So I continued to go to church by myself in order to meet up with him afterwards. That trend continued until being confirmed, after which my involvement in the church sharply declined. I'm no longer a practicing Catholic today. My feelings toward the church are more ambivalent than anything else. I appreciate the guidance and inspiration it provides people. I'm appalled by the violence that occurs in the name of religion. But I appreciate the basic values and principles I learned while attending church and CCD growing up. And for the last part, the culture other than my own that has had the greatest impact on me and why. This question was a very difficult one for me to answer. As I've said before, my exposure to other cultures is relatively limited. Maybe it's just because it's fresh in my mind, but maybe my experiences at Westwood High School have opened my eyes to two cultures that I was not that familiar with prior to working there. Westwood as a town is extremely affluent, and there's a culture that permeates the halls of the building as a result. This culture is not necessarily good or bad, just present. The people of the town are some of the nicest you'll ever meet, and the student body is a reflection of their abilities as parents and the strength of the community in general. As a result of my exposure to this culture, I believe I've gained a whole new level of appreciation for what growing up with very few luxuries and amenities does for people's appreciation of the things they have, the people around them, and the sacrifices that people have made to give them those advantages. The other culture I've been exposed to is at the opposite end of the spectrum. My work in the special education department and also as a football coach with the high school has led to some relationships with young men in the METCO program. It was in my dealings with these students I began to appreciate all I had and the advantages that I had grown up with. The level of respect I have for some of these young men and women for what they have to overcome on a daily basis cannot be understated. It is a testament to the effectiveness of the METCO program that, that lives so diverse can be intertwined and provide both faculty and students a chance to learn through personal interaction on a day-to-day basis. That's a little about me and my cultural and linguistic background.